Chapter 458. Xin Miao's eyes slightly sunk as she stared coldly at Huang Fu Hao. Huang Fu Hao was a person who liked to see others in a difficult position, as if the imperial family of the Qin country had the word vicious in their blood. Shen Xian and the Qin country did not have any antagonism, but Huang Fu Hao still refused to let them go. Perhaps this was a destined enmity. Before Emperor Wen Hui could speak, he heard a chuckle. Everyone looked towards the direction of the voice and saw Prince Rue, who was sitting at the VIP seats, put down the wine cup in his hands and looked at Huang Fu Hao. His voice was low and pleasant to listen to, with a kind of lazy drunkenness, almost with a bit of bewitching color, but his words were impolite. He said, "Since Brother Huang Fu loves General Shun so much, one can request from His Majesty. His Majesty is generous and would not disagree." It was obviously pushing the boat with the current, but when it fell into everyone's ears, it had 1,000 different meanings. How would Huang Fu Hao really want Shen Xian? He was only pushing Shen Xian to the teeth of the wind, and waves to see Shen Xian struggling. If Emperor Wen Hui really gave Shen Xian to him, the Qin country would have no choice but to provide for Shen Xian due to their face. But who knew if Shen Xian was Emperor Wen Hui's spy? The Qin country and Ming Qi were still in a mutual probing relationship, so who would place an untrustworthy person under one's eyelids to find trouble for oneself all day long? Emperor Wen Hui also thought of this point, and the strange expression gradually dissipated and returned to his previous appearance. He smiled. Talents are cherished by the world. If the crown prince insists on wanting General Shun, then Zhan can only respectfully comply. This time Huang Fu Hao was placed in an awkward situation. Just now he had provoked so much, and now he had fallen into a disadvantageous situation. It was impossible to get this person back, but if one were to let it go like this, it would be like losing face. And all this was because of a sentence from Prince Rue. Huang Fu Hao looked fiercely at that masked man, as if he wanted to carve that person into his eyes. Princess Mingyan and Huang Fu Hao were together, and seeing that Huang Fu Hao was in a difficult situation, naturally she wanted to help him out. It was just that firstly Prince Rue had unlimited elegance, and she was not willing to become enemies with him, and secondly she could not afford to offend the great Liang people. She vented all her anger on the Shen family. Looking at Shen Xian, she suddenly laughed. Her voice was thin and sweet, but because of her current attitude, it seemed a bit sharp. She said, "How would General Shen dare to take back such a great general? With such bravery, Bin Gong and Crown Prince older brother would have a headache. Why don't we take back the young miss of the Shen family? I heard that the young miss of the Shen family is the apple of General Shun's eye and is a beauty. I wonder if our great Qin will have this fortune?" Luo Tan and Feng and Ning suddenly grabbed Shan Miao's hands and became vigilant. Luo Ling and Shen Qing's expressions slightly changed. Shen Xiu's and Luo Shuiyan's expression sank, and Shen Xian suddenly looked at Princess Mingyan. As for Shen Miao, she lowered her head and looked at the teacup in front of her, as if she did not hear Princess Mingyan's words. She watched as the tea leaves in the teacup swirled around and slowly sank to the bottom of the tea. A general of a country couldn't be easily taken away, but it was easy to take away a minister's daughter. If one wanted to have a good relationship with the Qin country, marrying over a princess or a minister's daughter was a common thing in the past. It was just that no one was willing to marry to a foreign country, not to mention that after marrying over, there would be no father or older brother to help, and even if one were to suffer grievances, one could only swallow it. Shen Xian smiled. "My daughter is mischievous and cannot afford the princess love." There was no trace of politeness in his words. Emperor Wen Hui's eyes were deep, but he did not intend to speak out to help. Shen Xian had such a straightforward temperament, and once it was related to Shen Miao, his attitude would be incomparably tough. Chapter 459. When Shen Yu saw the situation, there was a flash of gloating in her eyes. She really wished that she could marry Shen Miao to the Qin country, and it would be best to marry an old man as a concubine and torture her to death in a foreign country. That Princess Mingyan did not think that Shen Xian would reject her without giving her any face, and there was a look of displeasure on her face. Because when she answered, Shen Xian's matter had already passed, and Huang Fu Hao did not have any reason to continue, and was too lazy to speak. He sat at the side leisurely drinking his wine. and coldly looked at Princess Mingyan, making things difficult for the Shun family. Princess Mingyan said, "One cannot say it like that. Everyone knows that the young lady of the Shin family's army has both ability and integrity. Why? Does young lady Shin look down on Bingong and is not willing to greet Bingong?" With such a rude hat being put on, Shun Miao could not cover it up even if she wanted to. She simply stood up and bowed to Princess Mingyan. "This official's daughter greets your Princess Highness." She suddenly stood up, and everyone's eyes in the hall landed on Shun Miao. 2 years' time was enough to change a lot of things, including the impression of an idiot female that was deeply engraved in people's hearts. Because it was too far away, it gradually faded. When the young female in front stood up, she was like a different person from the memory. The light purple dress made her skin even more translucent like jade. After staying in a place like the Shaochun city for 2 years, the sandstorms did not even grind her down a bit, but instead the noble air around her became more obvious. Her facial features were as delicate as a painting, which made one's heart feel comfortable, but there was a faint majesty in her gestures. Gentleness and firmness were strangely blended on her, and there was a kind of grace and dignity. Even the Empress by the Emperor's side did not seem to have such a natural bearing. Princess Mingyan's brows wrinkled. She did not expect that Shin Miao would have such good looks and bearing, and she had long known of Shin Miao's name as an idiot. Bringing Shun Miao out was nothing more than to embarrass the Shin family, and did not think that at this moment it would be lifting a rock to smash one's own feet. But the reason why Princess Mingyan was Princess Mingyan was that she had some capital to be arrogant. She immediately raised her eyebrows and looked at Shun Miao up and down, as if she was sizing up goods, and said, "Young Lady Shun has the countenance of a flower and the moon, and is indeed an outstanding beauty. No wonder General Shun wanted to hide young lady like a pearl in his palm. With such good looks, I wonder which family will be fortunate enough to marry young Miss into their mansion in the future." These words were a little overboard, and Shin Xian immediately glared at him. Although he had to take into consideration the other party's identity, he could not tolerate his own daughter being spoken to like this in public. Just as she was about to speak, that Princess Mingyan diverted the topic. "One think that young Lady Shan is also talented?" As soon as these words came out, the expressions of everyone in the hall became very interesting. Ipe Lan and the rest were trying their best to hold back their laughter. What talent did Shin Miao have? That was something everyone was well aware of. In these 2 years, he went to the Shaochun city again. The Shaochun city was a borderland with many martial artists, and one feared that they were even more vulgar. Shun Miao's eyes slightly drooped. This official's daughter's talent is shallow. The princess is overpraising. "Miss Shun, you don't have to be modest." Princess Mingyan smiled innocently, speaking of which, when Bingong was still in the Qin country, one had heard that a few years ago young Lady Shun obtained first rank in the Ming Chi's academy examinations. When Bingong heard it, one was extremely moved. Now seeing young Lady Shun again, one recalled this old matter. Shin Miao lowered her head and did not speak. Luo Shuiyin and Shun Qiu, however, were anxious in their hearts. At this moment, if one still could not see that Princess Mingyan was deliberately finding fault and deliberately targeting Shin Miao, then one would be blind. With that said, everyone recalled the Chrysanthemum Banquet's academy examinations, where Shun Miao and Kai Lin competed in archery, and the 3 arrows made Kai Lin speechless, and he ended up in a sorry state. It was also at that time that Shin Miao, who was completely different from the past, appeared in front of everyone for the first time. Chapter 460. Coincidentally, Kai Darren and Kai Lin were present at the tribute banquet, and Kai Lin's face immediately turned red. Now that Kai Lin was 2 years older, he had matured a lot as compared to the domineering one. That little grudge with Shan Miao had long been thrown to the back of one's mind with time, and because he was no longer infatuated with Shun Yu, it could be said that the grudge was resolved with a smile, but one did not expect that the old matter would be brought up in front of so many people, making him extremely embarrassed. It was not only Kai Lin who was thinking about the old matter. In the corner of the tribute banquet, the Marquis of Linan, Xieding, and his 2 sons were sitting. The current Marquis of Linan was getting older, and no longer had the high and vigorous spirit of the past. Even in such an occasion, he only wanted to find a quiet corner. When the matter of the academy examinations was suddenly mentioned, He remembered that Xie Jingxing was also there, and unexpectedly went up to the stage and defeated Xie Chongwu and Xie Chongqiao. At that time, when he returned to the residence, he angrily reprimanded Xie Jingxing. But in his heart, he was proud of Xie Jingxing thinking of the old matters. It was even more difficult to bear. Xie Ding revealed a dejected expression, but it was seen by Xie Chongwu and Xie Chongqiao, who were beside him, and a trace of darkness flashed in their eyes. Princess Ming'an continued to speak. Today Bin Gong also have the interest to compete with young Lady Shan. Why not compete in archery? Just treat it as a game. These words were said abruptly and strangely. Emperor Wen Hui was the first to laugh. Young Lady Shan is a delicate young lady. How could she know such a thing like archery? Your Majesty does not know. Princess Ming'an smiled. At that time, young Lady Shan's grace was something that even the great Qin had heard of. It is said that a tiger father does not have a dog daughter. General Shin is so valiant. So young Lady Shan must be an extraordinary female. Moreover, young Lady Shan is a delicate female. So is Bin Gong not a female? Or is it that your Majesty feels that my great Qin is not worthy to be on par with the Ming Qi? Princess Ming'an looked delicate and beautiful, but her words were very vicious. In one sentence, she brought out the entire Ming Qi. If one did not compete, it meant that the Ming Qi did not look at the great Qin. At this time, how could Emperor Wen Hui let the great Qin and the Ming Qi have a rift? He immediately looked at Shen Miao and said in a seemingly gentle manner, "What does young Lady Shan think?" Shen Xian clenched his fists as he really wanted to help Shan Miao reject this rude request. But if one were to reject it, it would only give Princess Ming'an more justifiable leverage. It was Shan Miao who glanced at Princess Ming'an and lowered her head. This official's daughter dare not disobey the princess instructions. Did not dare to disobey. At the end, it was still expressing one's unwillingness, as if Princess Ming'an was bullying others. Princess Ming'an also heard the meaning in Shen Miao's words, and her face sank. She then thought of something and giggled. She said, "I heard that during the academy examinations, young Lady Shen and that opponent used the method of betting their lives to compete. Today, we will also use the method of betting our lives to compete. All right?" No. Shen Xian did not wait for Shen Miao to finish and flatly refused. His face was cold, and he did not care about Emperor Wen Hui's expression as he looked at Princess Ming'an and said word by word, "Since your Princess Highness said it is a game, then just treat it as a game. Why must one implicate one's life? Moreover, the tribute banquet is a joyous occasion. It is better not to see swords and sabers at the banquet." When Luo Shuiyin saw Shen Xian speaking, she could not help but grip the teacup in front of her tightly. At that time, they did not know about the matter of Shan Miao betting her life with Kai Lin during the academy examinations, and when they returned to the capital to know about it, their hearts palpitated endlessly. If they were present, they would definitely not let Shen Miao use her life as a gambling stake. Now that this Princess Ming'an from the Qin country obviously had ill intentions, how would she let Shen Miao take the risk? Who knew that when Shen Xian said this, Huang Fu how unexpectedly opened his mouth and smiled. Even so, one must treat the game seriously, and that would show the seriousness of the great Qin towards the Ming Qi. General Shen, it is only to let young Lady Shen and my younger sister play a game. Could it be that General Shan is afraid? Or is it that the Ming Qi cannot afford to lose? His words were filled with thorns as he looked at Emperor Wen Hui. If the Ming Qi is afraid of losing face, then there is no harm in dampening Ming An's mood. Chapter 461. Since it had already risen to the face of the country, if Emperor Wen Hui did not make a sound, then he would be humiliated by the great Qin in front of the ministers. In the future, how would he be able to establish his prestige? He did not even look at Shen Xian and directly said to Shen Miao, "Since Princess Ming'an is interested, Shen Miao, accompany Princess Ming'an to play." With the emperor's golden mouth and jade words, it was useless for Shen Xian to say anything else. Shen Xiao clenched his fists and Luo Tan and Feng and Ning looked at each other uneasily. Shen Miao whispered, "Yes." Her expression was not flustered, but it made everyone slightly startled. Princess Ming'an turned her head to look at Shen Miao and coincidentally met Shen Miao's gaze. Shen Miao's pair of eyes were extremely clear, like a child's flawless eyes. Originally with this kind of eyes, One would be able to see through anything with a glance. But it was this pair of eyes that were looking at Princess Mingyan. The gaze was as calm as a pool of water that had settled for 1,000 years and was not able to stir up any waves. Thus one could not see any trace of emotion. One was unable to see through it. Princess Mingyan could not help but feel irritated. She smiled and let her maids fetch the bow and arrow. She first smiled and stared at Shen Miao. This is a rule that Bin Gong often play in the Great Qin. One person would hold the bow and arrow while blindfolded, and designate the other person to place the fruit on their body, and let the other person shoot. She did not let go of Shen Miao's every expression. Does young Lady Shen understand? The surrounding people sucked in a breath of cold air. Last time in the academy examinations, Shen Miao and Kailin had fruits on their heads, but their eyes were still open. To shoot an arrow while blindfolded, was not one's life being manipulated by others? Just listening to it made one's hair stand. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyin were already unable to restrain their anger. Shen Miao smiled gently, as if she was not frightened by Princess Mingyan's words. Many thanks to the princess for informing. She was this calm and did not lose the imposing manner of Ming Qi's side. Immediately more than half of the people present could not help but look up to her. Huang Fuhao stared at her, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Luo Tan pulled the corner of Shen Miao's clothes. Biao, youngest sister, why don't I go on your behalf? I've practiced martial arts before, so I know a thing or two about it. If it really doesn't work, I'll just avoid it. Shen Miao shook her head and looked at Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyin, who still wanted to stop her, and said softly, no need to worry. Since she said it like that, then she has confidence that she would not hit me. If they hit me, they would be in trouble. Huang Fuhao and Mingyan are both smart people and won't do stupid things. They are only doing this to scare me and embarrass me. But sister, Shen Xiao held her shoulders worriedly, you'll be afraid if you're alone. Regardless of whether she can hit you or not, how can she let you go alone? I'm not afraid. Shen Miao replied in a warm voice. Moreover, if she hurt me, I also have a chance, so why would I let her off? When she said this, the corners of her lips curled up slightly. It was clearly a smile, but it made people feel a clear chill. Luo Ling patted Shen Miao's shoulder and said softly, be careful. Shen Miao nodded her head and directly walked towards the main hall. She and Princess Mingyan actually walked towards the main hall together, but one would not know if one did not compare. When the two of them walked at the same time, it made others have a strange illusion. Princess Mingyan was a real golden branch and jade leaves, and was brought up by the imperial family. Her appearance was delicate and beautiful, and should be noble and respected, but when she walked beside Shen Miao's hands were crossed and her back was straight. She did not look left or right as she walked and looked straight ahead. Her dignified and graceful bearing actually crushed Princess Mingyan to the point that she was worthless. There were sounds of hissing in the hall. Huang Fuhao's expression also gradually became ugly. Chapter 462. In all fairness, it was not that Princess Mingyan was indescribable, but Shen Miao's magnanimity and composure would make the people around her feel dejected. But thinking about it, it was unimaginable. It was clear that Shen Miao was a young lady of an official, and Princess Mingyan grew up in the palace, so how could she not be compared to Shen Miao? Naturally, they did not know that Shen Miao had been an empress in the inner palace for many years, and she was extremely demanding of herself to be perfect because of Fu Xiu Yi, and those rough experiences in the Qin country made her have a bearing that was indifferent to favor or disgrace. In the previous life, if it was not for Mei Foreign's secret struggle and Fu Xiu Yi's connivance, she could actually be a good empress who was the mother of the world. It was just that this perfect dream was ultimately shattered alive, but it allowed her to have an unconcealable brilliance in this life. Princess Mingyan did not notice everyone's expression and only looked at Shen Miao with that shiny black longbow in her hands. This bow was most likely made of good wood and was soaked in special medicinal herbs, making it look extremely hard and cumbersome. Princess Mingyan said to Shen Miao, this is Bin Gong's bow. Let's take one arrow each, shall we? Bin Gong will first shoot you with the arrow, then it will be your turn to pull the bow. The words set the sequence, and the people of Ming Qi revealed an indignant look, as Princess Mingyan was obviously bullying others. But Shen Miao only lightly complied, and her expression did not waver. The more she showed that she did not care, the more flustered Princess Mingyin's heart was. She swept a glance at the VIP seating, and suddenly her eyes brightened as she sweetly said, "But now that we are competing here, one fear that some people would feel that it is unfair. It is better to let His Highness Prince Rue of the Great Liang be the judge, and stand here to inspect the bow and arrows, to show that we did not falsify." Finishing, her eyes looked affectionately at Prince Rue. The young ladies of Ming-Chi who were seated started to scold this Princess Mingyin in their hearts for not knowing shame. This was clearly an opportunity to get close to Prince Rue, and one think that she was intoxicated by Prince Rue's beauty, thus she did such a thing. But Prince Rue had always been unbridled in his actions, and this Princess Mingyin's request was inexplicable, so he would not agree to it. Who knew that when Prince Rue heard it, he pondered for a moment before nodding his head, all right? This was out of everyone's expectations. Even Emperor Wen Hui and Huang Fu Hao took another look at Prince Rue. One saw Prince Rue lazily standing up from his seat. His legs were long, and he took 2 steps to the middle of the hall and stood beside Shen Miao and Princess Mingyin. Princess Mingyin was overjoyed and delicately stretched out her hands to place the bow in Prince Rue's hands and said with a smile, "Then would Your Highness Prince Rue check this bow and see if there is any problem?" On the seats of the princes, Prince Zhou sneered and said in a low voice, "This princess of the great Qin Empire is really restless. She's making a scene in front of so many people." His tone was full of disdain. "But Miss Shan is unexpected." Prince Jing looked at Shen Miao, who was standing shoulder to shoulder with Princess Mingyin. "To be so calm, even if it is an act, one's courage and insight is outstanding." Speaking of which, Prince Zhou touched his chin. "This young lady of the Shun family is becoming more and more tasteful." He looked at Fu Xiaoyi, who did not speak a word. "Number 9, do you regret?" Fu Xiaoyi lightly said. "Fourth older brother must be joking." Behind Fu Xiaoyi, there was a green-clad male who was standing quietly. His gaze went past everyone and landed on the purple-clad young female. Pei Lang looked very calm, as if he was looking at a stranger that he had just met for the first time. It was just that the hands in his sleeves were clenched into fists and were slightly trembling. 2 years had passed, and this young female had become more and more attractive. Just like what she said, she was invited back by the heavenly family. But just after returning to the capital, trouble came knocking on her door one after another. The tree longed for peace, but the wind would not cease. Shen Miao did not do anything, but there were people who took the initiative to look for her. Chapter 463. But Pei Lang knew that Shen Miao would not put herself in a difficult situation, because she had a heart that was more ruthless than everyone else. Prince Rue quickly returned the bow to Princess Ming, and Princess Ming shyly and timidly took it and said to Shen Miao, "May young lady Shan stand over there." Also, she picked up an apple from the maid's tray and handed it to Shen Miao with a smile. "Young lady Shen, place it on your head." Shen Xiao, who was seated, suddenly clenched her fists. "Yes." Shen Miao's eyes drooped down as she took the apple and walked over to the other side. Everyone looked at her actions, and Princess Mingyin had already ordered people to tie black cloth strips over her eyes. But Prince Rue walked over to Shen Miao's side. Under everyone's eyes, he took the apple from Shen Miao's hands. Shen Miao was startled for a moment as Prince Rue took that apple and gently placed it on her head. Shen Miao looked up at him. Because there was something on her head, Shen Miao was afraid that the apple would fall if she moved too much. Thus she could only look at him motionlessly. The young man was extremely tall, and even if Shen Miao had grown a few centimeters in these 2 years, she would only reach his chest. She could see the golden buttons on his shirt, and she could also see the meaningful look in his eyes. The silver mask revealed this man's good-looking chin and red lips. The corners of his lips were slightly hooked, making one think if there was such a smiling face under the mask. His black eyes were like the stars and autumn water. When he looked over, it seemed to be gentle, but also seemed to be ridiculing. Ridiculing? He placed the apple on Shen Miao's head and bent a finger to rub Shen Miao's hair, as if he was stroking a small beast in captivity. But it was only for a short moment before he took it back. Because he was blocking with his body sideways, when others looked at it from this angle, they would only feel that this Prince Rue of the Great Liang was placing the apple for Shen Miao, and did not have any other actions. He turned and walked to the side, as if he was watching a good show with his arms crossed. Shin Miao's attention was attracted by Princess Ming, and in front of her, Princess Ming-un was slowly pulling the bow. That bow seemed to be very cumbersome, and Princess Ming-un was also pulling it strenuously. The harder she pulled, the more the bow was pulled, and the heavier everyone's heart became. Especially Shin Xian's family, their faces were as heavy as water. The more the bow was pulled, the greater Princess Ming-un's strength would be, and the greater the strength of the arrow, the more dangerous it would be for Shen Miao. One feared that the residual force of the arrow would bring Shen Miao down, and in this competition, how was it like what Princess Ming-un said? It was only a game, but this was a big matter that concerned the face of a country. Losing was a loss of face, but showing fear was also a loss of face. Shen Miao and Princess Ming-un, everyone was actually optimistic about Princess Ming-un, and only hoped that Shen Miao would not lose too badly. Shen Miao quietly looked at Princess Ming-un, whose eyes were tied with a black cloth. One did not know if Princess Ming-un was deliberately torturing Shen Miao as she pulled the bow slower and slower, and the sound of the bow being pulled tore the hearts of everyone present. Shen Miao's eyes were in a trance, as if she was not at the tribute banquet but in a foreign country, the Qin country. The princes and princesses of the Qin kingdom, as well as the ladies of the officials' families, surround her in the middle as if they are watching a joke. And she was wearing clothes that had been mended countless of times, and there was a fruit on her head as she looked at the person opposite anxiously. That person opposite was arrogant and despotic, dressed in gorgeous and exquisite clothes, and had a white cloth tied over her eyes. She arrogantly said to the crowd of males and females around her, "Look, today let the Empress of Ming-Chi put an apple on Bin Gong's head. Later all of you watch clearly for Bin Gong. See if this Empress of Ming-Chi, who was born in a military family, would be so scared that she peed in her pants? Ha ha ha. You must see clearly and tell Bin Gong." She arrogantly pulled the bowstring, and the arrow shot over with a shio sound. It just happened to miss by a little, but it went from top to bottom, piercing through her hair bun and piercing through her lapel. She screamed in panic and wrapped her clothes tightly, but when she covered it, she heard the ridiculing laughter from all directions getting louder. Such a humiliating memory, but it overlapped with what was in front of her. Shen Miao's lips slowly hooked up, but one did not know if it was out of bitterness or hatred. Her clear eyes seemed to have a layer of black fog that slowly spread to the bottom of her eyes, making it unfathomable. Prince Rue, who was at the side, quietly bent his fingers, paused for a moment, and then quietly released it. She slightly tilted her head in an action that was almost invisible to everyone. Chapter 464. When the arrow shot through the air, everyone present held their breath and focused their attention. There were even some timid females who directly covered their eyes, not daring to look at this scene. The ministers were clear in their hearts that no matter how arrogant and vicious the princess of the great Qin country was, it was impossible for her to shoot a general's daughter in Ming-Chi's territory in front of so many people. But it was one thing to be clear in one's heart and another to see with one's eyes. They, as bystanders, felt their hearts beating fast. So what about Shen Miao? Shen Miao quietly watched and did not even close her eyes, but seriously stared at the arrow that was heading towards her, as if she wanted to see the arrow clearly. But in everyone's eyes, it was her calm and steady demeanor. The arrow made a shio sound, but it was light and skillful. Just by a little bit, it just brushed past Shen Miao's head. He avoided the bright red apple by a hair's breadth. Shin Xiao, who was seated, suddenly heaved a sigh of relief, and Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyan's tightly clenched hands slightly loosened. Feng and Ning and Luo Ten patted their chests, and Luo Ling picked up the teacup in front of him to drink a mouthful, to cover up his worried expression. The entire audience was silent. Huang Fu Hao was originally smiling, but gradually he could not smile anymore. Princess Ming-un waited for a while, and did not hear any cheers or ridicule towards Shen Miao, and there was a bad premonition in her heart. She pulled off the black cloth that was covering her eyes, and saw that the apple on Shen Miao's head was still safe and sound, and her arrow was not far away. And that purple-clad young female, her hair was not messed up, her clothes were still intact, and there was no trace of panic on her face. She only looked at her lightly. Your Princess Highness, just now it seemed that my hand slipped and did not shoot. Did not shoot. That sentence was extremely light, but it seemed to contain the most complacent ridicule, making Princess Ming's cheeks burn with pain. But after being stunned for a moment, Princess Ming reacted. She looked at Xin Miao and said angrily, "You must have moved just now. It was you who moved. Bingong would never miss. If you did not move, how would Bingong miss?" No one expected that Princess Ming would suddenly make things difficult, and even Emperor Wen Hui revealed an unhappy expression. Is the princess saying that hundreds of people in this banquet are covering up for young Lady Xin? Xin Miao stood perfectly straight, and from the beginning to the end, she did not even try to evade. Even though one did not know if it was fake or real, but if it was real, this female's courage was enough to make everyone in the world admire her. No matter how much Emperor Wen Hui feared the Xin family was after all Ming Qi's people. As the Emperor of Ming Qi, how could he let a Qin country's princess slander Xin Miao in front of him? One feared that today he would indulge Princess Ming's nonsense, and tomorrow the emperor's prestige among the officials would plummet. Princess Ming felt wronged in her heart and looked at Huang Fu Hao. Huang Fu Hao looked at her with a gloomy face, and Princess Ming quivered. She did not dare to look at Huang Fu Hao again and turned to look at Prince Rui, who was standing at the side, and said sweetly, "Your Highness." Prince Rui had just seen clearly. Did the young lady of the Xin family hide? When she said those words, Princess Ming softened her voice and stared at Prince Rui, which made everyone present feel somewhat ashamed. Prince Rui's lips hooked up. No. Princess Ming was surprised for a moment. Your Highness, Prince Rui is saying that Xin Miao did not hide? Are you questioning this prince's eyes? Prince Rui retorted. He looked to be infinitely graceful, and it was enough to make one's heart admire him, but when his voice was cold, it made one feel the chill and dare not look straight at him. Princess Ming jumped in shock, but saw Xin Miao standing opposite and looking at her with a smile. Your Princess Highness, since one is willing to bet, one must be willing to lose. Or is it that your Princess Highness cannot afford to lose? Chapter 465. You are presumptuous. Princess Ming screamed. She suddenly saw the angry gazes that were directed at her from all directions, and suddenly understood that this was Ming Qi's territory, and screaming at Xin Miao had already angered the crowd. She looked at Xin Miao and suddenly sneered. Why would Bingong not be able to afford to lose? But do not be too pleased with yourself too early. Bingong cannot shoot. Can you shoot? Princess Ming's heart was filled with anger. Her archery skills had already reached the point of perfection, and this bow was the biggest bow that she had used since young. Princess Ming had played with this kind of blindfolded archery for many years in the Qin country, and had never made a mistake. She originally wanted to give Xin Miao a little trouble, and in order to teach the Xin family a lesson for their rudeness, at the same time as shooting the apple, it would be easy to shoot Xin Miao's clothes to make her lose face, so how could she miss at the crucial moment? But under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Xin Miao did not evade, and this made her not know where the problem was. She proudly proposed a competition, but in the end, not only did she not make Xin Miao lose face, she also did not shoot. If those princesses and princes of the Qin country knew about it, they would laugh at her. Thinking of this, Princess Ming had some more disgust and resentment towards Xin Miao. Xin Miao looked at Princess Ming's actions, and her heart turned slightly cold. In her previous life, she stayed in the Qin country for 5 years, and had dealings with this princess of the Qin country for 5 years. Xin Miao was clearer than anyone else what kind of temperament Princess Ming had. Princess Ming liked to tease her like this, to play the game of shooting in front of everyone. With one arrow, her hair would be blown apart, and with another arrow, her clothes would be torn apart, and occasionally, accidentally, she would even graze her body. When Princess Ming pulled the bow, she knew what Princess Ming's idea was, which angle the arrow would fly from, and where it would land. After repeating the scene countless of times, how could she not be clear? She simply tilted her head slightly, and let the arrow coincidentally brush past her. No one would believe Princess Ming's words, just like how no one believed Xin Miao's words in the beginning. Being wronged, misunderstood, and made a fool of, It should be let this noble princess personally enjoy it. Of course, it was not only this. Xin Miao took the bright red apple and smiled. If it was me, I would ask your Princess Highness to bite this apple in your mouth. At the beginning, the audience was still discussing in a low voice, but when they heard what Xin Miao said, there was a moment of silence. Princess Mingyan's eyes widened and looked at Xin Miao in disbelief. What did you say? Her voice became sharper, and because of the anxiety, it was unpleasant to hear. Xin Miao looked at her with a smile, and there was still a bit of innocence in her eyes. Princess, didn't you say that this is the game of the Great Qin dynasty? The archer will choose where to place the apple. Your Royal Highness wanted to put the apple on my head, so I let it go. Now, she smiled generously, if your Royal Highness is afraid, you can change to someone else. It was better if she did not say those words, but when she said those words, Princess Mingyan was so angry that she almost flipped over. If it was another person, would it not mean that she, Princess Mingyan, was timid and could not afford to lose, and would lose all her face in front of the Ming Qi, the great Liang in the Qin country? Yi Lan sucked in a breath of cold air and said to Shun Yu, is she crazy? How dare she go against Princess Mingyan? Originally in the academy examinations, Shun Miao and Kai Lin confronted each other because Shin Xian's official position was not lower than Kai Darren's. But now that the other party was a princess of a country, it was really beyond one's expectations that Shun Miao dared to provoke. Kai Lin and Kai Darren looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Initially they thought that Shin Miao was targeting him, but now it seemed that Shin Miao did not even put a country's princess in her eyes, so what else was there to say? Chapter 466. The prince's banquet was also filled with sighs. Prince Li smiled with deep meaning. This young lady of the Shun family is really vengeful. Princess Mingyan stared at Xin Miao, and facing her sharp gaze, Xin Miao only smiled lightly. In helplessness, Princess Mingyan could only look to Huang Fuhao for help. Huang Fuhao lightly coughed and was somewhat angry that Xin Miao did not know how to appreciate favors. Princess Mingyan also represented the face of the Great Qin, and he could not let Princess Mingyan be dissatisfied. Thus he looked at Emperor Wen Hui and then glanced at Xin Miao. It is only a game. Why is the young lady of Ming Qi so unforgiving? Emperor Wen Hui looked at the Xin family. Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyan were drinking tea by themselves, as if they did not hear the words from above. Xin Xiao and Luo Ling looked up unruffled, but did not express their stance. Feng and Ning and Luo Tan stared at Princess Mingyan with indignation in their eyes. The Xin family's attitude was very clear, and they did not intend to let it go like that, so they were obviously going against Princess Mingyan. Shan Xian also had anger in his stomach. Just now Princess Mingyan was so aggressive that Xin Miao had no way out, and now it was Princess Mingyan's turn to have a taste of this. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. When Princess Mingyan schemed against others, she should have thought of what it was like to be schemed against herself. Since the Xin family was already placed in the teeth of the wind and waves, and since the Qin country's people were targeting the Xin family, then there was nothing to worry about. When Shin Xian's violent temper came up, he thought that a barefooted person would not be afraid of someone wearing shoes. So even if he shot Princess Mingyan to death today, it would not matter. Emperor Wen Hui looked at Shan Xian's attitude, and his heart understood. Shin Xian was protective of his shortcomings, not to mention that it was related to Shan Miao. Since Shan Xian wanted to be the target, Emperor Wen Hui was happy to see it happen. Moreover, he did not like Princess Mingyan's arrogant and willful temperament that did not put Ming Qi in her eyes, and planned to kill Princess Mingyan's prestige. So he smiled at Huang Fuhao. It is a game between children. Why the crown prince need to be so worried? Since they are playing happily, Zhen will naturally not stop them. Huang Fuhao did not expect that the Shen family was a hard nail, and even more did not expect that Emperor Wen Hui, this old fox, would sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Thus he did not have any other way. Moreover, the ministers of Ming Qi gradually became bolder and started to whisper. If they were to really reject, then the Qin country's face would really be gone. He gave Princess Mingyan a warning glare. Mingyan, since it is you who suggested it, then play with young Lady Shan till the end. He glanced at Xin Miao again and said meaningfully, since Xin young lady is playing, she will definitely not hurt you. The unspoken meaning was that if anything happened to Princess Mingyan, Shen Miao would definitely pay the price. Shen Miao only smiled when she heard such threats. Rest assured, Your Princess Highness. Since we did not sign the life and death agreement, this official's daughter will not hurt Your Princess Highness. The more she said that, the more uneasy Princess Mingyan felt. But now that she was riding a tiger, it was hard to get off, so she could only do as Shen Miao said. Walking to the other side, Princess Mingyan's eyes were like knives that were cutting Shen Miao's body. She suddenly thought of something and her eyes brightened up as she smiled. But young lady Shun, Bin Gong's bow is not something that anyone can pull. One fear that you, before the words cannot pull it up could be said. One saw that Shen Miao had already pulled the bow easily. It was different from Princess Mingyan's strenuous pulling. Shen Miao's posture was extremely beautiful and the pull was very relaxed, as if this bow had been with her for decades, and she was very proficient in it. She smiled at Princess Mingyan and faced Princess Mingyan's incredulous gaze. She lightly said, "Good bow. Your Princess Highness bow. I am also very comfortable with it. Many thanks." Chapter 467. She waved her hand and instructed the maid to tie the black cloth over her eyes. Just as the maid was about to move, she saw Prince Rue picking up the black cloth on the maid's tray and playing with it. Everyone looked at him strangely. Prince Rue walked to Shen Miao's back and held her chin with one hand to lift her head up slightly, while the other hand wrapped the black cloth around Shen Miao's eyes. Luo Tan's eyes widened and pulled Feng and Ning. "This? What is the meaning of this?" Prince Rue's action made Luo Tan curious. Emperor Wen Hui, who was sitting on the high seat, slightly frowned, and Princess Mingyan looked at Shen Miao with jealousy and killing intent in her eyes. Shen Miao was tied up and could not see anything clearly, and could only feel that the person behind her was gentle and gentle. His fingertips were cold, and when it accidentally touched Shen Miao's cheeks, it was like snowflakes kissing the clothes, and there was a faint coolness. But for some reason, the places that were touched started to heat up again. When the people behind no longer moved, Shen Miao then faced the direction of Princess Mingyan and knocked an arrow. Everyone held their breath as they watched her actions with rapt attention, and their hearts were extremely nervous. Some people secretly complained why Shen Miao would do this, to let Princess Mingyan bite the apple in her mouth, and it would be able to humiliate Princess Mingyan. But this also meant that if Shen Miao was not careful, she would injure Princess Mingyan and even lose her life. The princess of the Qin country lost her life in the Ming Qi, so how would the Qin country leave it at that? Even if Shen Miao sacrificed her life, it would not be enough, and would implicate the entire Ming Qi. If one wanted to let Princess Mingyan be safe and sound, one could only deliberately shoot to the side, and as such, the Ming Qi would lose face. Thinking about it, only if Shen Miao shot the apple in Princess Mingyan's mouth would she be able to win beautifully. However, that was almost impossible. Huang Fu Hao stared at Shen Miao. Others were not clear, but Princess Mingyan was his younger sister, so he naturally knew how heavy Princess Mingyan's bow was. Ordinary women wouldn't be able to pull the bow. Even those who were skilled in martial arts and had some foundation in martial arts would have to practice with the bow for a while, not to mention women. Even men would have to practice with the bow for a while. But just now when Shen Miao casually pulled the bow, that kind of skillful posture, skillful gestures, and relaxed expression made people suspect that she had already touched this bow countless times before to be able to use it so smoothly. However, that was simply impossible. It was Princess Mingyan's first time in the Qin country, and it was also Shen Miao's first time touching this bow. Huang Fu Hao's heart suddenly had some interest as he looked at Shen Miao, as if he had seen something new, and his gaze became deeper. Shen Miao was completely unaware of it. She closed her eyes and her hands caressed the patterns on the arrows, every tiny scratch on the heavy bow. It was exactly the same as his previous life. She had touched this bow countless of times, and Princess Mingyan would always generously pass the bow to her when she was in a sorry state. "It is your turn." In fact, Shen Miao had secretly practiced countless of times, and she could hit the target, but every time, she would deliberately shoot far away and be laughed at by the princesses and princes of Ming Qi. Because she was a hostage, she should compromise and live under others' charity and not be arrogant and despotic. Even if she could win, she must lose, and lose to make Princess Ming happy, so that she would have the chance to return alive to see Fu Ming and Wan Yu. Those most difficult years were engraved in her heart like the simple and unadorned patterns on the bow. His forbearance from his previous life could finally be displayed openly now. She was no longer the Empress of Ming-Chi, but could freely and fearlessly attack Princess Ming, just like what Princess Ming did to her. Chapter 468. She said, "Trouble your Princess Highness not to dodge." Finishing, her hands loosened and the almost fully drawn bow made a bung sound as the arrow shot towards Princess Ming like a meteor. Princess Ming was so scared that her eyes blurred. That arrow came too fast, and she wanted to dodge, but it was too late. She felt a pain in her mouth as the arrow was right in front of her eyes. She wanted to scream, but with the apple in her mouth, her body softened and she collapsed. The palace maids behind quickly supported her, and Huang Fu Hao stood up all of a sudden with a gloomy expression. The hall was filled with sighs, but Shun Miao took off the black cloth that was tied around her eyes and walked over to the fainted Princess Ming and took out the apple from Princess Ming's mouth. On the bright red apple, half of the arrowhead entered, and the remaining half of the arrowhead was outside. It would not pierce Princess Ming's throat, but one could see it clearly. All hit. It seems that this official's daughter's luck is very good. As luck would have it, all hit. She smiled. With a hua sound, the hall was suddenly filled with sighs. The officials of Ming-Chi were first stunned before their faces flushed with joy and started to applaud. Someone said, "Like father, like daughter." It was Princess Ming who suggested to compete in archery, and Shun Miao had no choice but to accept it. But at the end, Princess Ming did not hit, but Shun Miao hit, and Princess Ming even fainted from fright. Who was strong and who was weak? One would know with one look. Emperor Wen Hui had many suspicions towards the Shin family, but now that Shun Miao had helped him gain a lot of face and made the Qin country suffer, Emperor Wen Hui was now very happy. He looked at Shin Exine. "General Shun, you have raised a good daughter." Shin Exine cupped his hands and said that he did not dare. Shin Miao stood in the hall, and there was a slight wind that blew the corner of her skirt up like a blooming flower. She quietly stared at Princess Ming, who was being supported by the maids, and restrained all kinds of emotions in her eyes. When she turned her head, she met Prince Rui's gaze. One could not see what kind of expression was under the mask, but this man's gaze was warm and cool, making one somewhat confused. One did not know if he was smiling or not, but he glanced at Shun Miao before walking back to the VIP seats to sit down. Huang Fu Hao felt that he had lost face, but he did not know how to redeem it. Today's matter was sudden, and it was caused by Princess Ming, but to reach such a stage, Shun Miao was inextricably involved. Looking at Shin Miao, Huang Fu Hao snorted coldly. One did not think that young Lady Shun would have such skills. Shin Miao lowered her head and returned to her own seat. She was always so gentle and harmless. She was clearly merciless when she shot the arrows, but now she had a dignified demeanor, as if she was not the one who wielded the saber and spear. She was noble and dignified. Even if she wanted to say something out of anger, under this kind of attitude, it was as if the principles of Buddhism were on her side, making people speechless. "Shin Miao, just now you really—" Feng and Ning pulled her hands. "If you were a male, I would marry you. Revenge with enmity. It is really delightful." Luo Tan also said, "Biao youngest sister, I know that you are not one to be bullied." In the Shaochun city, the Luo family had some understanding of Shun Miao's temperament. Weak and easily bullied? Only blind people would think so. Shin Miao's eyes drooped down. Everyone thought that she held a grudge, and because Princess Ming pressured her, she repaid it in such a manner. One did not know that her arrow resolved the hatred of the past lifetime. Facing Fu Xiu-yi, such a scheming person, naturally one had to plan step by step. As for a person like Princess Ming, if she did not return the humiliation she suffered in the past lifetime, she would not be able to live up to her rebirth. Some people needed to endure, and some people who could not bear it would come knocking on the door. She handled things carefully, but on some matters, she still had a consistent temper. With the protection of the family and the bargaining chip, why would she not dare to go against Princess Ming? That would be slapping her face. Chapter 469. Luo Ling handed over a cup of hot tea and asked warmly, "Is Biao youngest sister all right?" "Nothing," she replied with a smile. She was sensitive to feel that there was a clear gaze on her, but when she looked around, no one was looking over, so she thought that it was her misconception. At the seats of the distinguished guests, the youth wearing a mask bent his fingers and flicked the wine cup in front of him. There was a white jade ring on his fingertips that was glowing with a faint jade color. It was a good tribute banquet, but no one expected that there would be such an unforeseen event in the middle. But if one were to investigate the reason, it was Princess Ming-An's own fault. And Shan Xian, who had just returned to the capital to resume his official position, with this unyielding attitude and Shan Miao's beautiful win, once again made a name for himself in the Ming Qi's tribute banquet. No matter what the outcome was, with Shan Xian's high profile, it made others somewhat fearful. At the prince's banquet, Fu Xiuyi's expression had already changed from the initial calm and composed to a calm and collected look, and from time to time he would look at Shan Xian's side. Occasionally he would look past Shan Xian and stop at the purple-clad young female who was sitting quietly. It was not only her. There were a lot of gazes that were sizing up Shan Miao. There were young talents that felt that Shan Miao attracted attention, and naturally there were also Huang Fu Hao's gaze that made others feel uncomfortable. At the end, even a careless person like Luo Tan also noticed it and said, "Why is everyone looking at Biao youngest sister? Are people not allowed to eat?" Luo Ling smiled and said to Shan Miao, "Biao youngest sister and I exchange positions." Luo Ling's position was slightly closer to the inside, and after Shan Miao exchanged positions with him, Luo Ling's tall stature was able to block her, and also block some probing gazes, and for a moment it was much more comfortable. Until the end of the tribute banquet, there were no other matters. Huang Fu Hao left halfway, and said that he wanted to see Princess Ming-An, who had fainted from fright. Naturally no one stopped him, but everyone was well aware that after a few days, Princess Ming-An would hate Shan Miao. Even though Shan Miao had Shan Xian's protection, it would be easy for Princess Ming-An to find an excuse to make things difficult for Shan Miao. Everyone's gaze towards Shan Miao unconsciously had a little sympathy. Only Shan Yu and entourage felt pleased when they saw Shan Miao. Most likely Shan Wan wanted to get close to Shan Xian, but now that Shan Xian was reinstated and was invited back by Emperor Wen Hui, it would not be a good thing for the relationship between the brothers to be too stiff. But this time, Shan Xian had made up his mind. He did not even look sideways when he passed by Shan Wan, and did not have the slightest intention of greeting him. Everyone saw this and understood in their hearts. When Shan Xian was forced to leave the capital, the news of him separating from the Shen family was known by the entire capital. It had always been easy to add flowers to a brocade, but difficult to send charcoal in the snow. Now that Shan Xian had made a comeback and Shan Wan had come to greet him, any man with guts would not bother about it. In terms of cleaning up, Shan Xian had the upper hand. Shan Wan also did not crazily stick to the cold buttocks. Shan Xian did not pay attention to him, so he did not impatiently go forward. The two brothers were like strangers. After the banquet, some of Shan Xian's former colleagues came over to greet him. Luo Shuiyan brought Shan Miao outside to wait for the carriage to arrive. Luo Tan skipped in front, and Feng Ning had already gone back with Feng Foren while Luo Ling and Shin Xiu walked at the back. After turning through a palace door, there was the horse carriage that Shan Xian had arranged. Shan Miao turned her head and coincidentally saw that at the end of the long corridor in the palace, there was a slender figure slowly walking over. Before one could see the appearance clearly, one could see from afar that the silver mask on his face shone brightly under the light of the lantern, and the embroidered pattern on the corner of the robe was especially clear in the night. One could not see clearly what kind of texture it was, and only felt that it was extraordinarily gorgeous. Shan Miao looked at it carefully. When that youth walked to a distance away from Shan Miao, he stopped and tilted his head slightly. One did not know if he was looking at this side. Shan Miao looked at him quietly. In the night, the long corridor in the palace was deep and serene. This person was covered in the moonlight as he stepped on the swaying shadows of the trees. One could not see clearly what expression he had, but one felt that he was like an immortal demon from a painting. He slowly stretched out his hand, and his fingers slightly bent before lightly knocking 3 times on the pillar at the palace door. Xinxiu and Luo Ling discovered that Xin Miao did not follow over. Xinxiu walked in front of Xin Miao and asked, "Younger sister, what are you looking at?" "Nothing." Xin Miao recovered to her senses and said, "Go to the horse carriage and wait first. The wind outside is strong so that one would not catch a cold." Luo Ling said warmly. Xin Miao nodded her head and lifted her feet to walk towards the horse carriage. But she suddenly stopped her footsteps and turned her head to look at the long corridor. The moonlight in the corridor was like water, and the flowers painted an intoxicating picture on the ground. When the breeze blew past, the flowers trembled and there was no figure in the empty corridor. It was as if everything just now was an illusion. Luo Tan's soft urging voice was heard. Xin Miao turned around and closed her eyes before lifting the corner of her skirt up the horse carriage. Chapter 470. On the way back, Shenxian and Luo Shuiyan did not speak much. Even though they tried to look relaxed on the surface, they still revealed some seriousness. Xinxiu was also not his usual self. Even though Luo Tan had a carefree temperament, she was sensitive enough to sense that something was not right and did not speak. Today, one had offended Princess Mingyan, which also meant offending the crown prince of the Qin country. The Shun family had just returned and was pushed to the teeth of the wind and waves. Even though Shenxian tried his best to avoid it, it was like there was an invisible hand behind his back that pushed the Shun family out. Shenxian and Luo Shuiyan were not afraid of any difficulties that might appear, but since Shan Miao appeared today, they were afraid that Princess Mingyan would hate Xin Miao and use underhanded means to trip them up. But things had already happened, and when the water comes, the earth will cover it. When the soldiers come, the generals will counter them. The only way was to better protect Shun Miao and not let any slip-ups happen. By the time they returned to the residence, Shun Miao had entered her own courtyard to freshen up, and it was already somewhat late. She lit the oil lamp, and when Guyu saw that she did not have the intention to rest, she said, "Is young lady still worried about tonight's matter?" "It doesn't matter. With master and madam around, they won't let the Qin princess do anything stupid." Xin Miao shook her head. She was clearer than others what kind of temperament Princess Mingyan had. Princess Mingyan's temperament was very selfish and strong, and during the tribute banquet in the previous lifetime, Princess Mingyan also made things difficult for her. It was because Princess Mingyan thought that Fu Xiuyi was such an outstanding person, but he married such a vulgar wife, and was very disdainful. Now that the Great Liang's people had changed to Prince Rue, the most outstanding person in Princess Mingyan's eyes had become Prince Rue, but she still did not let her off. Perhaps this was what people said. Some people's enmity was destined by the heavens, no matter how many lifetimes were separated. "All of you go down," Xin Miao said. "I cannot sleep and will play chess for a while." Guyu still wanted to say something, but Jingzhe pulled her sleeves. Jingzhe said, "Then these servants will withdraw first. Young lady must not think too much. When one feels tired later, then rest early and do not tire one's body. The night is cold, so don't stay up too late." Xin Miao complied and Jingzhe and Guyu retreated. On the small table in front of the table, there was an empty chessboard. Xin Miao held the white pieces in one hand and the black pieces in the other as she seriously played with herself. She played seriously. Time slowly passed, and the chess game gradually changed from nothing at the beginning to black and white crisscrossing, appearing extremely complicated. In the beginning, she was able to play the game with ease, but later on, she had to think hard for a long time before she placed a piece. It was so quiet outside the courtyard that one could not even hear the chirping of the birds and the chirping of the insects as the Ding capital fell into a beautiful dream. A cool breeze was blowing in the courtyard. Xin Miao looked at the chessboard and gently exhaled. Over the past 2 years, the various forces had taken turns to enter the stage, and the chess pieces that had been arranged had already reached their positions. From a certain point of view, even if they had the upper hand, they might not necessarily be able to achieve successive victories. This was a game between her and Fu Xiuyi, but now it seemed that she still thought of some things too simply. Everything in this world was changing. She was changing. She was no longer the her from her previous life. Naturally, other people would change as well. The only thing that didn't change was the change itself. No one could predict what kind of changes these changes would bring to the game. She glanced at the chess game on the table, stood up, walked to the window, and opened it. The rustling autumn wind that blew in from the window gave rise to some coolness. The shadows of the trees swayed in front of the window. She looked at it for a while before turning around. The oil lamp in the room had burned to the last bit, and the candle flame flickered before extinguishing. When the lamp was extinguished, the moonlight flowed into the room like flowing water, illuminating the room. It was a little cooler than the lights. A duh sound was heard from the front of the table. One did not know when a person was sitting in front of the chessboard. He held a black piece in his hand and casually placed it on the board before raising his head to look at Xin Miao. Chapter 471. The purple gold robe looked even more gorgeous under the moonlight, and that pattern seemed to be somewhat familiar. It was clearly an arrogant posture, but it was blocked by the half-silver mask, making it look somewhat profound. Xin Miao was not surprised that there was an uninvited person in the middle of the night. She closed the windows without a change in expression, and the room suddenly became dark again. Xin Miao walked to the table and fumbled for a match to light another lamp. Under the warm yellow halo, the fragrance of the clothes and the shadow of the hair seemed exceptionally ambiguous. Xin Miao held the lamp and walked to the opposite of that person to sit down. "You are waiting for me?" The purple-clad youth's voice was low, and it was exceptionally pleasant to hear in the night. Because he deliberately suppressed it, it was somewhat hoarse, but it was like a lover's whisper beside one's ear. His voice was also smiling and seemed to be very happy. Xin Miao stared at the mask on his face. Even the mask could not hide his good looks. That beautiful chin and red lips, on the contrary, because it was covering his true appearance, it was more mysterious and more captivating. It was rumored that everyone in the imperial family of the Great Liang were beautiful. She had never seen Prince Rui's true appearance, but knew that just based on elegance, this person was already outstanding enough. "Your Highness knocked 3 times on the pillar. Is it not to remind this official's daughter to visit at the 3rd watch? This official's daughter does not dare to disobey," she answered. When those words were said, Xin Miao saw it clearly. The lips of the person opposite hooked up and said, "Really smart." His attitude was clearly frivolous and even somewhat romantic, but one did not know why it made one feel some distance, as if one knew the indifference and cruelty in this person's bones. Xin Miao quietly looked at him and said, "What words does your Highness want to say to this official's daughter?" The purple-clad youth casually picked up a black chess piece from the chess basket and played with it. The slender white hand holding the black chess piece showed a kind of exquisite beauty. He swept a glance at the chess game and said, "This chess game is indeed interesting. Little girl, the winds and clouds of the world are all placed in the chess game by you. One do not know where is the Great Liang? Which piece is this prince's chess piece?" He was actually able to see through this chess game with one glance, as it was the current situation of Ming Qi. Xin Miao did not speak. His voice was lazy with some indifference. "This prince saw you at the tribute banquet today and seemed to be old acquaintances with Princess Mingyan. You have seen Princess Mingyan?" Xin Miao's heart tightened. She naturally knew Princess Mingyan, and other than Huangfu Hao, no one would have any doubts about today's performance. One was a princess of the Qin country, and the other was a young lady of an official's family in the Ming Qi. The Qin country and the Ming Qi were separated by thousands of miles, and it was Princess Mingyan's first time coming to the Ming Qi, so no one would link her with Princess Mingyan. However, the words of the person in front of him tore apart the surface mercilessly and exposed the truth. What did he discover? What did you find? Furthermore, he was able to sense that something was amiss just from the few encounters they had at the banquet. If it was the latter, then the man in front of him was simply too terrifying. However, her eyebrows did not move. Her fingers in her sleeves tightened slightly, and a smile appeared on her face. Unfortunately, this official's daughter had not seen Princess Mingyan before, but is acquainted with His Highness Prince Rui. The purple-clad youth turned his head to look at her and suddenly placed both his hands on the table as he leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "Oh, when?" Xin Miao looked at the person in front of her. His breathing was gentle, but the golden buttons were cold. There was a smile on his lips, but his eyes were somewhat indifferent. One did not know if this was a man of fire or ice, but his entire body was filled with danger. He was attractive enough, but it made Xin Miao instinctively want to avoid him. That pair of dark eyes that were as deep as the sea stared at her. She lowered her head and avoided the other's meaningful gaze, and stared at the exquisite embroidered buttons in front of her before lightly saying, "Long time no see, Xie Jingxing." Chapter 472. The air seemed to be still at that moment. In the oil lamp, the sparks made a small pi-li-pa-la sound, and a small flame fell down. In the dark night, it lit up for a moment before disappearing. Xin Miao raised her head and looked at him. The purple-clad youth smiled faintly as he looked at Xin Miao. Both of their shadows were reflected on the ground, showing a lingering posture, as if he was the one who turned his head to kiss Xin Miao. He slowly retracted his hand and returned to his own position. His voice was still cheerful as he said, "Trust that you have been well, Xin Miao." The purple-clad youth reached out to remove the mask on his face. Sword-like eyebrows, affectionate starry eyes, a nose that was hanging and lips that were painted with rouge. It was as if yesterday he was still a handsome youth with red lips and white teeth, but after 2 years, he was a truly handsome man. The smile on his lips was as usual slightly ridiculing and mischievous, but there was no longer the arrogance of a youth in his eyes. That was a kind of depth that made one's heart palpitate. It was as if the dark night was beautiful because of the stars, but the darkness made one terrified. His noble and elegant demeanor was displayed to the extreme after 2 years, and every move had the innate arrogance of a noble. It was as cold as the clear moon, but as dazzling as the scorching sun. Without the restriction of his identity, the Xie Jingxing who appeared again and no longer restrained his brilliance was so dazzling that one could not ignore him. He looked at Xin Miao with a smile that was not a smile and said ambiguously, "Not seeing for 2 years, who gave you the courage to call my name?" He said it like that, but in the end he had changed this prince to me. Xin Miao said, "Now you are not the little marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Lin and in the Mingqi, and do not like to call you by your name. It is also possible to call you Prince Rue." There was finally some sarcasm in the words. From the residence of the Marquis of Lin and in the Mingqi to the younger brother of Emperor Yonglu of the Great Liang. This time Xie Jingxing had indeed gone astray. But Xin Miao said it politely, but she had underestimated Xie Jingxing. Xie Jingxing smiled lazily. "It is indifferent to insist on calling my name. But one forgot to tell you that Xie Yuan is my real name and Jingxing is my courtesy name. When you call me Xie Jingxing, you are calling me by my little courtesy name. Why? You've grown up and become more passionate." The smile on his lips was evil and frivolous. "Have we reached the point of calling each other little?" Xin Miao glared at him. Other than relatives, only lovers and husband and wife would call each other little. Xin Miao did not expect that after Xie Jingxing changed his identity, Jingxing actually became his little character. Speaking of which, she then remembered that Emperor Yonglu of the Great Liang was also surnamed Xie, and the imperial family of the Liang dynasty was the Xie family. What a coincidence. Xie Jingxing was minding his own business pouring tea for himself. After 2 years, Shen Xian had already moved out of the general residence and opened another residence. Xie Jingxing came uninvited and acted as if he was at home as usual. Just like 2 years ago, he treated the Shun mansion as his own courtyard and could come and go as he pleased. He took a sip of tea and glanced at the angry Shen Miao and seemed to find it very interesting. Courtesy demands reciprocity. "What do you want me to call you, Jiao Jiao?" That voice of Jiao Jiao was so sweet that it left a fragrance on one's cheeks. In addition to Xie Jingxing's moving beauty, if it was a normal female, one would have long been bewitched. Xin Miao's body was also hot from being called. She thought that even if Xie Jingxing did not have the identity of the imperial family, he would be able to live well as a prostitute in a small brothel. Perhaps he could even be famous throughout the world. "What are you thinking about?" Xie Jingxing asked. "Thinking that you are born with such beauty that even the top hostess in a small brothel cannot be compared to you. No wonder you need to wear a mask to hide." Xin Miao deliberately angered him. Chapter 473. Xie Jingxing choked, and one did not know what he was thinking about as his lazy expression stiffened for a moment. When Shen Miao saw him like this, her heart was extremely carefree. Before she could speak, Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. To be so worried about me, it seems that you are in love with me? Shen Miao said, does Prince Rue know how to write the words thinking too much? She was disgusted by Xie Jingxing's little words and could not call him little Marquis Xie, so Shen Miao simply used the cold Prince Rue instead, obviously wanting to draw a clear line. In the beginning when you hugged me and kissed me, you were not this heartless, he said. Shen Miao stared at him incredulously with wide eyes, but did not know that this appearance was like a deer that was just born in the mountain stream, with clear and round black eyes that were very delicate. She said, what do you mean by your words? Xie Jingxing reached out and pinched her face. His action was too fast, and Shen Miao could not dodge in time. When she reacted, Xie Jingxing had already retracted his hand and thought for a moment before saying, it seems that you do not remember. On the first night you left the capital, I had bid farewell to you. Shen Miao was stunned and looked at him without speaking. Xie Jingxing sighed. Indeed, after drinking wine, one do not recognize others. You do not remember what you did to me? Shen Miao's face revealed a tangled expression. As the saying goes, one's temperament will be messed up after drinking. Her alcohol tolerance was actually not bad, but the plum blossom wine that night was too intoxicating. She wanted to prevent herself from saying the wrong things and causing others to be suspicious, so she avoided everyone and slept alone in her room. She did not think that Xie Jingxing came over. Prince Rue must be joking. Prince Rue and I are just acquaintances. What can I do? Shen Miao suppressed the uneasiness in her heart, but her face was calm. But she knew very little about the matters between men and women, and in her previous life, she only blindly fawned over Fu Xiu Yi and was not clear about a male's thoughts. In this aspect, she was really as immature as a white paper. And to deal with a black-hearted person like Xie Jingxing, she was really too inexperienced. Xie Jingxing smiled and was not in a hurry to refute and spoke unhurriedly. You seem to want to be an empress. After getting drunk, you still want a Poli Gong to watch the fireworks and even want the crown prince and princess to accompany. He looked at Shen Miao with interest. Empress Shen? Shen Miao was originally trying to cover up the tea she was drinking and almost spurted it out. How many years had it been since she heard this form of address? For a moment, Shen Miao almost thought that she was dreaming. She feared that after her rebirth, she was filled with flowers and the reality of her loved ones was just a beautiful dream. And after she woke up, she would still be in that cold palace, walking step by step towards the end of her family being wiped out. Shen Miao's entire body stiffened, and she had to admit a fact. She originally thought that Xie Jingxing deliberately said that to trick her, but now it seemed that Xie Jingxing really came that night and really saw the scene after she was drunk. Otherwise, Xie Jingxing was not a deity. How could he know so many things? But how much did she say and how much did Xie Jingxing hear? Xie Jingxing was so smart. How much did he guess? When Xie Jingxing saw her uneasy look, his eyes darkened but his lips hooked up into a smile. There is no need to be so afraid. I have always been tolerant towards women. Do you want to know what you did to this king? What did I do? Shen Miao looked at him calmly. Nothing much. Xie Jingxing lazily supported his chin with his hand and seemed to be thinking. But the words that he said were shocking. You only hugged me and did not let me go, pressed me down and kissed me, cried and shouted that you want to be my empress, and wanted me not to neglect you. Shen Miao. I did not do that kind of thing. Shen Miao said. No matter how drunk she was, she would not have any beautiful thoughts towards Xie Jingxing. Moreover, that kind of style was not her style of doing things. Chapter 474. You want to deny? Xie Jingxing frowned. This is not honest. Shen Jiaojiao, I will give you money. Shen Miao made a prompt decision. I can compensate you however much you want. Xie Jingxing quietly looked at her for a while, and Shen Miao did not know why, but she felt that his gaze was like a knife, as if Xie Jingxing could not wait to kill her. After a long while, Xie Jingxing then smiled and gritted his teeth. Do you treat me as a prostitute or a male pet? Money? This prince is never short of money. Shen Miao was silent. Xie Jingxing took a deep breath and said, How did you discover it? Xin Miao did not expect him to change the topic and asked puzzledly, What? Xie Jingxing picked up the mask on the table. How did you discover my identity? 2 years ago I died in battle, and no matter what, it is not reasonable to guess my identity upon meeting. One had already guessed it before seeing you. Xin Miao said, Guessed that you were from the Great Liang, but did not guess that you were from the imperial family. Afterwards, when one saw you at the tribute banquet, one vaguely felt that you were familiar and boldly guessed it. When Xie Jingxing heard it, he gradually frowned and looked at Xin Miao. Guessed it 2 years ago? That night in Wulong Temple, the little marquis came over to drink tea and eat snacks. Xin Miao's expression was calm. Luckily, I was able to eat a little of that snack. Xie Jingxing raised his brows. So what about it? Unfortunately, Xin Miao said, that snack seemed to be made by the Great Liang imperial family chef, and the taste was very delicious. Xie Jingxing was slightly startled. 2 years ago, he encountered the scene of Shen Miao framing Shenqing and Prince Yu in Wulong Temple, and because of interest, he simply went to her room with Shen Miao. Because he was out running all night and was hungry, he borrowed Shen Miao's tea to eat some snacks. He even fed Shen Miao a piece. He himself was working in Mingqi and was at the inn living like a prince. The Great Liang's pastry chef was also by his side, and that bag of pastries came from the hands of the Great Liang chef. Xie Jingxing had thought of many clues that Xin Miao could guess his identity, but he never expected that it would be this. A bag of pastries would actually reveal some clues. But his eyes were sharp as he looked at Xin Miao. How do you know that this was made by the Great Liang chef? I was fortunate to eat it once, Xin Miao said. She had indeed eaten it once. In Mingqi's tribute banquet, naturally there would be congratulatory gifts from other countries. As for the pastries, it was just a small gimmick. Emperor Yonglu of Mingqi loved to eat pastries, so the imperial family chef was ingenious and added fruit juice into the pastries, giving the pastries a fruity flavor. It was because of the novelty of eating cold pastries during the tribute banquet that Shen Miao specially made it for Fu Xiuyi a few times. It was just that Fu Xiuyi did not like to eat sweets and would always give it to the servants, making her sad for a while. And the pastries that Xie Jingxing ate that night had the fruity flavor of the Liang imperial family's pastries. And at that time, the tributes had not been paid yet, so it was impossible for the pastries to be passed over. At that time, Xin Miao felt strange. Although Xie Jingxing didn't know where Xin Miao ate this cake, he didn't ask much. That's all. It was just a lucky guess. Xin Miao's eyes hung down. Just based on a bag of pastries, how could she be sure that Xie Jingxing was from the Great Liang? The real suspicion started from that imperial physician Gao Yang, that she saw in the palace. At that time, she only felt that he was familiar, but later on she finally remembered that she had seen this imperial physician Gao before. In the tribute banquet in the previous lifetime, the people that the Great Liang sent over were a prince of first rank and an important minister. That important minister was a famous think tank in the Great Liang, and at that time Fu Xiuyi let Pei Lang pay more attention to this person. It was not anyone else but Gao Yang. Gao Yang's identity at that time was not some imperial physician Gao, but a minister of the Great Liang. And that day in Mingqi's palace, she saw that there was a familiarity between Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang, and in addition to the pastries previously, she more or less made some connections. Chapter 475. Afterwards, she went to the northwestern region, and the news of Xie Jingxing's death came. After the previous shock, Xin Miao slowly calmed down. In the previous lifetime, Xie Jingxing should not have gone to war at this time, but in the previous lifetime and this lifetime, Xie Jingxing had the same ending. Xin Miao did not believe in fate. Moreover, with her understanding of Xie Jingxing in this lifetime, she did not believe that such a powerful person like Xie Jingxing would die so miserably. If one were to say that Xie Jingxing was planning something with this step, she would somewhat believe it. If one were to say that dying in battle would allow one to start over with a new identity, and there would be less trouble, it would be in line with this person's straightforward character. One had to know that with the identity of the little marquis of the Lin and prefecture, one would not be able to support Xie Jingxing's ambition. What exactly was his ambition? Xin Miao's gaze landed on the black and white chessboard, and a trace of horror flashed in her heart. Your luck has always been good. Xie Jingxing looked at her calmly. But Xin Miao hesitated for a moment and finally could not help but ask, how did you become the current Prince Rue? Did Xie Jingxing create a fake identity? If that was the case, his guts were really too big. The person he impersonated was not someone else but the imperial family of the Great Liang, and was even Emperor Yong Li's younger brother. If it was discovered, one feared that dying 1,000 times was not enough. But if it was true, then what was his identity for the past 10 years? Why would he become Xieding's son in Mingqi? I was originally Prince Rue of the Great Liang dynasty, Xie Jingxing said. Now it is returned to its rightful owner. Xin Miao's heart moved. Marquis Xie is not your father? Xie Jingxing smiled in disdain. Marquis of Linen? What qualifications does he have to be my father? That meant that Xie Jingxing was not Xieding's biological son. Xin Miao's heart became more and more aghast. Xie Jingxing's identity would most likely involve a lot of things, and she had never paid attention to these things in the previous lifetime. Xin Miao suddenly thought of how in the previous lifetime, Fu Xiuyi did not spare any effort to suppress Xie Jingxing, and did not hesitate to arrange his people in the Xie family's army. At the end, Xie Jingxing died in the hands of his own people, and the Xie father and son were buried on the battlefield. Other than Xie Changwu and Xie Changchao, there were no other descendants in the Xie family. Was it really because the Fu family wanted to attack the Xie family for their meritorious deeds? Or Fu Xiuyi had already discovered that Xie family's identity was not right? Fu Xiuyi wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots? When Xie Jingxing saw her flickering expression, his eyes became deep and his smile became even more gentle. His appearance had grown. His handsomeness and beauty were perfectly blended together. He was both good and evil at the same time. He was very good-looking. He knocked on the table. You've made a lot of progress in meeting an old friend today. Xin Miao recovered to her senses and said as she looked at him, Prince Rue is also very glorious now. From the residence of the Marquis of Lin An's little Xie Marquis to the current Prince Rue, Xie Jingxing became more and more valuable. Originally in the Ding capital, he could walk sideways in Mingqi, but now that Prince Rue's reputation was out, one feared that he would ascend to the heavens. Are you satisfied? Xie Jingxing's lips curled into a smile. Are you proud? Xin Miao's brows were dignified. This official's daughter is a Mingqi person and Prince Rue is a Great Liang person. Well, water does not interfere with river water, so why would there be glory? Xie Jingxing picked up the mask on the table and wore it again. The silver mask fitted his facial features very well, and not only did it not cover up his brilliance, it made his mysterious temperament even more bewitching. When you kissed me, what you said was not this sentence. His eyes were more moving than the autumn moon outside as it flowed over Shen Miao's body. Did you not say that I am your person? Xin Miao refused to admit it to death. Prince Rue had misremembered. In the future, I will help you remember. Xie Jingxing stood up and a corner of his purple robe brushed across the table, messing up that game of chess. He said, I will come and see you next time, Shan. Jiao Jiao. Xin Miao. Xie Jingxing flew out of the window. Xin Miao looked at his back and thought that after tomorrow, she must ask Shun Xiu to arrange for a few more guards at the courtyard doors. In any case, there were quite a number of experts living in this residence. Shen Xian, Luo Shuiyin, and Xin Xiu were people who had been in the army before, so how could they not be alert at all? It was really a joke to allow one to come and go freely in the residence. Outside the window, there was a purple-clad male walking along the streets of the Shen mansion. At the third watch of the night, there was no one on the streets, and there was only this male and the guard behind him, with their long shadows swaying under the moonlight. Even the moonlight could not cover up the brilliance, and the silver mask was shining brightly. That guard behind him said, Master's mood seems to be good. He said that he was seeing an old friend, but after entering the Shen mansion and coming out, his lips were raised from the beginning to the end. One did not know what happy event had he heard to be this happy. The youth swept a glance at the guard. The golden threads on his sleeves were faintly discernible, and the embroidered clothes in the night made him look heroic. His eyes seemed to be smiling yet not smiling, and his voice was as pleasant as the spring breeze. Naturally, it is good to see an interesting person. Chapter 476. On the second day, Shun Miao woke up late. Xie Jingxing only came yesterday in the middle of the night, and after speaking to him, he was already very tired and slept the entire night without any dreams. When he woke up, it was already very late. Shun Miao rarely got up to be lazy, and Luo Shuiyan thought that she was tired from the tribute banquet yesterday. Thus, she let people specially prepare food for Shun Miao to eat after she woke up. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan went to the Ministry of War early in the morning. They had just been reinstated, and there were many old matters that needed to be settled. Shen Xiao and Luo Ling were not in the room, and because Luo Ling was looking for a new job, Shen Xian simply let Luo Ling help Shen Xiao, so that those people would not bully Luo Ling for being a newcomer. As such, in this brand new Shen mansion, there was only Luo Tan and Shen Miao. Coincidentally, Feng and Ning sent an invitation to Shen Miao and wanted Shen Miao to accompany her to pick some jewelry. Shen Miao let Luo Tan go and assigned a few guards from the Shen residence to Luo Tan, saying that she was tired today and wanted to rest in the residence for a day. Luo Tan did not say anything else and only left after exhorting Shen Miao. After Luo Tan left, Shen Miao let Mo Qing send a letter to Guangwen Tang, and Mo Qing complied before leaving. After 2 years, there were some changes in the Ding capital. For example, the once popular and bustling Baoxiang Lu, young Lady Lu Ying, was finally redeemed by that infatuated gentleman Mo for a high price of 1,000 taels of gold. Without a young Lady Lu Ying, the long-lost double-sided embroidery quietly appeared in the Ding capital, and one piece of embroidered silk could be sold for 100 taels of silver. One heard that the embroidery lady not only had outstanding skills, but was also beautiful. That embroidery shop also made a lot of money. If one changed their way of living, it might not be worse. No one knew what the new hope was after taking that step. Lu Ying was living so well that the people who were worried about her would naturally be happy. Pei Lang was a trustworthy person, and the moment Shen Miao saw Pei Lang at the tribute banquet, she had an idea in her heart. Pei Lang had already obtained Fu Xiuyi's trust, thus Fu Xiuyi would bring Pei Lang by his side. Even though Fu Xiuyi was suspicious, it was only after he became the ruler. In all fairness, the current Fu Xiuyi still appreciated and cherished talented people. Pei Lang was a person with a ravine in his chest, and Fu Xiuyi would definitely think of ways to keep Pei Lang by his side. Because of this, now that Fu Xiuyi had tested Pei Lang's talent, he should also test Pei Lang's loyalty. She could not rashly go to see Pei Lang, lest Fu Xiuyi became suspicious. This pawn had not even crossed the boundary between Chu and Han. She said, "Take out a cloak." Bai Lu and Shuangjiang were tidying up the room when they heard the question, "Is young lady going out?" Shen Miao said, "There are some matters that need to be done." Bai Lu and Shuangjiang no longer spoke. Guyu quietly went forward to comb Shen Miao's hair, while Jingzhou went to look for the cloak. Imperceptibly, Shen Miao's few maids immediately obeyed her orders. If someone saw this, they would definitely be surprised. Even the maids trained in the palace would not be so agile and calm. After leaving the residence, Mo Qing went to Guangwen Tang, and Shen Miao, called Qi Shen Miao, was now much closer to Shen Xiu's subordinates. Initially, when they were in the northwest region, Shen Miao gave Shen Xiu a number of ideas on the art of war, and these were naturally what she had heard from Fu Xiuyi's aides. It was just following the gourd, but in other people's eyes, they felt that Shen Miao was a brilliant strategist and had the talent to be a general. Those soldiers were all uncouth men, but they also admired Shen Miao's brain and were more respectful towards her. Shen Miao said to Qi, "Do not tell others about going out today." Qi's heart quivered. He was originally loyal to Shen Xiu, and at this moment he felt the pressure under Shen Miao's clear eyes as he nodded his head, "Yes." Chapter 477. Qi found an ordinary carriage for Shen Miao. This carriage was not eye-catching, and no one would recognize that it was the Shun family's carriage. There was no other reason than that Shen Miao had offended Princess Ming and from the Qing country yesterday, and Princess Ming and Huangfu Hao were staying in the Yinqing alley that was not far from here. If one were to bump into them, it would be bad if Princess Ming had found trouble with Shen Miao. This princess was very arrogant and willful. There were many guards in the Qing country, and if anything were to happen, it would be too late for Shen Xian and wife to rush over with their men. However, Qi was still very puzzled. After leaving the Ding capital for 2 years, if there was anyone in the Ding capital who had a friendship with Shen Miao, it would be the eldest young lady of the Feng residence, Feng and Ning. But today, when Shen Miao rejected Feng and Ning's invitation, it was obvious that she was not going to see Feng and Ning. Qi's thoughts ran wild. He thought of the stories that Luo Tan had told Luo Qian in the past at the Luo family, and his heart quivered. If it was really a play of a gentleman and a beauty being intimate, Qi had to tell Shen Xiu about it, even if he had to risk his life. It wasn't easy for their Shen family to produce such a talented and beautiful young lady. How could she be abducted by some wild boy who came out of nowhere? But he had never thought that the place Shen Miao wanted to go to was the Fengxian pawn shop. The Fengxian pawn shop was still the same as 2 years ago. It was still deserted. After all, not everyone had treasures that could be pawned here. Shen Miao got off the carriage, and Qi followed closely behind. Jingzhe and Guyu also jumped down. Before Qi had time to size her up, he saw that Shen Miao had already walked towards the pawn shop. The waiter, who was still wiping the dust on the table with a handkerchief, saw 4 people walking towards him. The person in the lead was wearing a cloak. She pulled down the hood of her cloak, revealing a delicate and pretty face. It was clear that she was a pampered girl from a wealthy family. Her entire body exuded a noble aura that no one dared to look down on. He smiled fawningly and said, "Miss, do you want to pawn something?" Shen Miao glanced at him. The pawnshop assistant had already changed and heard that after they went to the Shaochun city, the Fengxian pawnshop was closed for 2 years. It was only recently reopened, but one did not know if that Hongling young lady and Ji Yushu were still there. She said, "I'm looking for Hongling." The young waiter was surprised for a moment and carefully sized up Shen Miao again. Shen Miao looked at him calmly, and the young waiter paused for a moment before quickly saying, "May young lady wait for a moment?" He then turned and entered the back hall. A moment later, a red-clothed woman came, followed by the shop assistant from before. She was still wearing a red dress, and her appearance was quite charming. Compared to 2 years ago, she was even more charming. When she saw Shen Miao, her eyes congealed before suddenly smiling. "Long time no see. Young lady is more and more outstanding," making Hongling unable to open her eyes. These impudent and rude words were spoken by Hongling, but they did not seem cheap. Instead, there was an inexplicable sense of cheerfulness. Shen Miao nodded her head slightly. Hongling smiled again and said, "Same old rules. Young lady, follow me." But she pointed her jade finger at Qi and smiled tenderly. "This blockhead cannot follow us." Qi's character was lively and was not as cold as Mo Qing. Being pointed at by Hongling, such a flirtatious lady boss, his face turned red. But he still insisted, "This subordinate will follow young lady. You wait here." Shen Miao said, "I am going to see a friend. Jingzhe and Guyu will follow." Her tone was firm, and Qi could not say anything to refute. It was Hongling who saw this. A strange look flashed in her eyes. Most likely she did not expect that Shen Miao, such a delicate little person, would be able to teach the guards that she brought over a lesson so obediently. Moreover, no matter if it was Mo Qing or Qi, they all respected Shen Miao from the bottom of their hearts. A capable subordinate would more or less have some arrogance, but in front of Shen Miao, these people did not have any arrogance at all. Chapter 478. Shen Miao was a capable person. Hongling brought Shen Miao to Lin Jiangxian's small building. Jingzhe and Guyu followed behind as Shen Miao asked. One heard that the Fengxian pawn shop reopened not long ago. 2 years ago. 2 years ago there was a change in the shopkeeper's family, and he closed the shop and returned to his hometown. Not long ago he returned to the Ding capital. Hongling smiled and took over the conversation. Speaking of which, young lady is the first regular customer that our pawn shop has met. Shen Miao calculated in her heart before agreeing with a smile. When they arrived at the small building, just like before, Hongling placed her in an elegant room and said, "Hongling will go and call the innkeeper right now. Miss, please sit here and have some tea. Please wait for a moment." After saying that, she left. There were plums and tea on the table, and the fragrance of incense curled up. This elegant room was exactly the same as before. Such a big shop like the Fengxian pawn shop that did not do business for 2 years was actually just left like that and not rented to others. It really had the appearance of a wealthy landlord. Xin Miao had not finished her cup of tea when there was the sound of someone pushing the door open. She put down the teacup and saw a person wearing an emerald green robe with a golden crown on his head walking in with a smile. This person still had a baby face, but after all, because of the 2 years of experience, he showed a bit of youthful maturity. It was just that the mischievous look on his face was as before. But Xin Miao looked at him. Jiu Shu was able to wear such gaudy clothes so happily. This person was really coquettish in his bones. When Jiu Shu pushed the door open and saw Xin Miao, his eyes brightened and did not hide it at all as he praised. Originally thought that young lady Xiao Yao was the most beautiful young lady that this one had seen, but now it seems that Xin young lady is not much inferior. Not seen for 2 years, Shun young lady has become even more elegant that this one is unable to find words to praise young lady. When Jingzhe and Guyu saw it, there was a look of displeasure on their faces. Jiu Shu's words were like that of a lecher who molested good young females. But these kinds of nonsense were matched with an innocent face, which made one confused if he was deliberately pretending to be stupid, or if he was just saying it unintentionally. Xin Miao smiled gently. Manager Ji is also wealthier than before. Her eyes swept across Jiu Shu's gaudy clothes. Jiu Shu sat opposite Xin Miao and poured a cup of tea for himself. He looked very happy and seemed to be genuinely happy for the reunion. He said, "One did not expect that young Lady Shun would still remember this old friend of mine." One heard that General Shun had just returned to the capital and young Lady Shun was not in a hurry to see others, but came to the Fengxian pawn shop. It seems that you really regard this one as a trustworthy person. I am very touched. Xin Miao. Last night there was just a person who thought that he was in love, and now there was another one in front of her. Xin Miao felt a headache coming on. Moreover, Jiu Shu said it in all seriousness. He really thought that Xin Miao was this close to him. Xin Miao coughed lightly. Actually, one came here today to do business with Manager Ji. Just returned to the Ding capital, and there are many things that one is not clear about, thus one need to rely on by Xiaosheng. Jiu Shu was first startled before saying, "Do business? No problem. Whatever young Lady Shun wants to know, Bai Xiaosheng will do his best. As for the money, since this one and young Lady Shun are friends, one will give young Lady Shun a discount of 20%. Jingzhe and Guyu rolled their eyes at the back. Jiu Shu was in charge of such a big family business, and on the surface it was a pawn shop, but in fact it was a business without capital. Once a business turned into a steady stream of money, he was actually so stingy to only reduce 20%? Indeed, there was no businessman without ulterior motives. Xin Miao smiled gently. Money is easy to discuss, but this time the news is not easy to handle. Jiu Shu said, "Young lady should really know how to joke." Initially, my Fengxian pawn shop even accepted the business of creating news, so what is there to not accept now? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.